I'd like to introduce Daniel. Is it Sassi? Am I saying it right? Sassi?
That's that's
Yeah.
correct.
Great, excellent. So we've got Daniel Sassi
That's
here.
the Aussie version.
Okay. Do tell me, what's the other version?
Oh, if we're going to use the Italian version, you'd say Sassi.
Sassi. It sounds like I need like a an ice cream with lots of cocoa with it when I say that. Sassi.
Sassi. Oh, all it means is rocks.
Rocks. Did you say rocks? Oh, okay. Interesting. Different. Well, anyway, we've got Daniel Sassi. Am I saying it better? Anyway, let's move
Oh,
on.
that's
Let's not
fine.
get too caught
Yeah.
up. He's over in northern New South Wales, close to the Queensland border, in a place called Kyolge. I'm happy to be wrong, with a population of around 2,700 people. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, the township, but the council area is probably a bit more than that, about 10,000, I think.
Right. Okay. Good. And yeah, he's our first interviewee in respects to the tree and sea change interviews that are going to be conducting over the following weeks, where the aim is to go pretty much around Australia to the different states and actually talk to people who have gone from living in a city environment and, for whatever reason it may be, whether it was a desire to move, or their circumstances have changed, where they've been, in some respects, like catapulted into moving towards a tree change. But let's just say it's people have gone from a city environment and have wanted to go towards a tree change or a sea change, and getting really curious about what it is that went into that person's journey. What is it that they did? What happened, and so forth, moving forward to then actually arriving at their very own tree and sea change. So I guess just to paint a little bit of a picture for the people that are tuning in and wanting to know about this, what's a bit of a background, like, where were you before, and what was the circumstances that you found yourself wanting to, or having to, whatever the circumstances were, going from a big city environment towards a tree, in your case, a tree change, I guess I could say. So if you could just tell us a bit about that, just to give it a bit of background and kick us all off, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So, it's a bit of a long journey for me. As I was growing up, I grew up in Melbourne, in the big city, and my grandfather on my mother's side, he had some property way out of town on the very fringes, probably about 10 acres or something like that, in a place called Healesville. And it was an old guest home. And the property actually had two guest homes on it originally, and one of them had burnt down. And it was a place, I went to as a little boy, right up to the age of probably 20, 21. And I just used to love going there for the quiet, and used to explore the place and all the ruins. It had a bit of a famous five feel about it, actually, because of all the, still had the ruins of the one that had burnt down, with the old swimming pool and things like that, and real sense of adventure. But usually I was on my own, and I was quite comfortable being in my own solitude in that sort of environment, with the nature and all that adventurous side as well. So, but my uncle lived there, and he had his dog, and so there was that connection to family and the animals and things like that. When my granddad sold that, I was probably about early 20s, 21, 22. I was quite devastated, because that connection to that place had been broken. He was getting on and just wanted to set up things for his family, which was fair enough. So from that moment, I thought, well, if I can't, have that place in my life, I'll have to find somewhere myself. So I started exploring some ideas, and living on the fringes of Melbourne, let's say the Dandenongs, and eventually I was doing a university degree at the time in economics, of all things. And I decided to spread my wings and try something different. And I was doing in Box Hill in Melbourne, I was going to a place called the Oxford Theatre every day to learn the trade of becoming an actor. That was while I was out at Emerald, out in the Dandenongs, and decided that I wanted to get out of Melbourne, get into somewhere, a bit more nature, and ended up in Tassie doing my course in acting at the University of Tasmania, but living out of town at the time. So that was sort of the first step, I suppose. Ended up back in Melbourne for a while, dabbled around Australia, where I wanted to go, ended up in Perth for a little while. That didn't really rock my boat. Back to Melbourne, did some other things. I ended up doing a degree in teaching because it was a good backup for my acting stuff that I was doing, and I was able to keep myself pretty busy in Melbourne, and ended up in Darwin. That was my first teaching post because I knew the principal up there, which was lucky. And Darwin was a pretty amazing place, very different to Melbourne, a bit of I wouldn't say a cultural shock, but a big eye-opener. Just in terms of the weather and the environment, and finally meeting some Aboriginal people, which I'd never had that opportunity in Melbourne, which was a big eye-opener, and working with them and teaching them as well. And was there for about 3 years. Pretty extreme weather up there. So I decided after about 3 years up there to find the middle ground, somewhere, somewhere rural, which was a bit less extreme weather-wise, and ended up about halfway in between there in Melbourne in northern New South Wales. That was about 2004, 2003, 2004, and I bought a place near Kyolge, not the current one that I'm in at the moment. Bought a place there, real sort of rainforest environment, fairly run-down home, but did some work over a time. Went through a bit of a breakup, probably about 6 years later, and ended up buying another place, not far from Kyolge again, but closer to where I was working, because I was working in Lismore as a school teacher, as a drama teacher. And yeah, that's how I sort of ended up here at the place I am at the moment.
Yeah. And so that spanning of time, like from when you initially left Melbourne, and then you finally arrived in Kyolge in 2004, like what sort of time frame are you talking about there?
We're looking at well, when I left Melbourne initially, it was probably 1989. So, we're looking, that whole process is 11, 15 years, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
After a few little attempts at living at the bush, but none of them were permanent until I got up here.
So that initial, I think for a lot of people, there's the going from being in a city environment, which is known and familiar to them, and then, actually making that shift where they're going from that city environment, which is known, it's familiar, even dare say comfortable, and moving out of it to a country or a rural location, I think poses a lot of questions and a lot of doubts and a lot of uncertainty. Like when you found yourself going from, Melbourne across to Tasmania, that initial change, like what do you believe went in the mix for you personally to enable that to occur? What was it that you had or that worked for you?
Well, just really just being around the natural environment. I craved that, and that was what drew me to it, to finding another place, definitely outside of the city. Not that I was uncomfortable in the city or particularly unhappy, I spent 2 years as a little kid, 7-year-old, growing up literally in Bourke Street, if you know where that is,
Yeah,
right in smack bag middle of the city. So, and I knew the streets of the city like the back of like my own hands. So it wasn't that I was particularly unhappy in the city. I just always knew that that for me to settle my own story, to settle my own roots, getting out to the rural atmosphere was something that had to happen. Why? Just to be in touch with nature, just to have the fresh air, trees, fresh running water, all those things, rather than cars and smog and the noise.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that nature as an environment and all that meant to you was that sounded like a strong motivator for you to move towards that. Yeah, compared to the smog and the city and what that represented, it was about the trees, the nature, the fresh running water. There was a call, if I can use the word, there was a calling or a draw for you there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of that comes from, when I was a kid going up to my granddad's all the time, because that was, that had as much as he had his, his potato patch and his strawberries and all that, there was quite a lot of that was pretty pristine forest with a few creeks and gullies and all that sort of thing. And, we'd go to Badger Creek and things like that. And I just loved that environment. I just connected to it even as a kid. So I sort of craved it growing up and had to get there as an adult.
Right. So for you, like, you had that seed planted at a very young age in regards to your grandfather's property. And
for sure.
And that seed of nature and adventure and even there's elements of connection around family was going on in that process. So there's a lot of, I guess, neurology and emotion around that, which was a part of your leverage and saying, this is where I want to go. This is what it's all about.
Yeah. And even in that, like as a kid, it wasn't perfect. Like I was scared of the spiders in the outdoor dunny and was always wary of things like snakes and things like that. So it was never a perfect image of where I wanted to go. But I suppose that made me very aware of what I was in for when I got there.
Yeah. So there wasn't it wasn't the glossy magazine of country outdoors that was your impression of what it would be like to go to the country. For you, it was like...
If you knew my grandfather's place, so it was an old guest house with probably 6 different living quarters. 4 of them were locked up. If you went in there, all they had was worn out furniture and very dark, and the light fittings weren't there. So if you did grab his key and go into any of those other 4 rooms, it was quite scary as a kid. It was like walking into some sort of cavern or dungeon or something like that. But at the same time, there was a lot of romance because he lived in the, or not lived, but we used to stay in the main part of the guest house, which had a huge fireplace and all these historical documents and original paintings that were there from the 1920s and things like that. So there was a lot of romance attached to that as well. In the historical part of it, for me anyway.
Yeah. So then feeding into your own change, like, going from being in Melbourne, you'd completed a commerce and economics degree, and from previous chats we had, I understood that it wasn't your thing. So, moving away from the city environment, it didn't sound like there was a lot holding you, but there was a lot that was attracting you to moving away into a rural environment, to the country, everything that you made that mean. Yeah. So with that as well.
Sorry, I missed the last.
So there was a lot of attraction moving into the country environment because of the seed that was planted with your grandfather. There's a lot of energy around that. So there's a lot of moving towards experience for you, whereas moving away from the city environment. So from a magnetic point of view, it was it made it a lot easier that the city didn't hold a lot for you, but the country had a lot of sort of draw for you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But at the same time, I suppose it's not that I couldn't live in the city now. I definitely couldn't live in the suburbs, though. You know, I could live in the very inner city because I was brought up in that part as well. Suburbia to me, though, is nothing but ugliness, and I couldn't bear the thought of being, you know, like in the outer suburbs of a big city. I just it would drive me batty. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So talking about that in regards to when you went from, Melbourne and you went across to Tasmania, even though there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of good energy around it, you were moving towards your memories of what it was all about. You know,
Yeah.
when you arrived there, was there anything that didn't go so well?
Oh yeah. I went there with someone, and the first few months was great because I hadn't started my uni course yet. We started just going to someone had published in Earth Garden or one of those sort of magazines where they needed someone to stay on their property and help build their house.
Yeah,
So we did that for about 3 months before I started my course. Then we moved a bit closer to Launceston. And once I started my course, which was pretty intense, you know, like I was doing 70 hours a week, um, things in that relationship stopped working. So
sure.
that broke down. But I persisted in, I suppose, what I was doing. Not that myself and that person, it wasn't a a bad breakup or anything like that. You know, we still keep in contact even now. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
so it's still amicable, and that was all fine. It's just we were going different paths. So we came to an agreement with that. That was really the only thing, apart from the fact that I was a very poor uni student.
Mhm.
But at the time, you know, like I could get a rental property for something like, it was as cheap as from memory $40 a week, and I was getting something like $90 off study, and that was enough to live and to run my car and to do everything I needed to do, and you know, and that's the late 1980s. So go
Wow.
figure.
Oh, I just don't think people are saying, that Austin is so great these days. But anyway, that's a whole new
Yeah,
topic for
no,
another time.
no. Well, Tasmania was cheap. It was just so cheap to
Mm,
live and rent, and it was a great environment to do what I wanted to do. So,
yeah,
mm,
yeah. Okay. Because it's going from one environment that you're very familiar with, and there's infrastructure and respects of, excuse me, people that you know, places that you know, um,
yeah,
the things that are super comfortable, and traveling hundreds of kilometers away to a rural environment or a semi-rural environment, fringes of a town, or whatever you want to call it. you know
mm,
it's there's bound to be challenges in there, and I guess I'm curious about, like you're saying, like the relationship side didn't go well. Sounds like some of the other things in regards to the challenges were just part and parcel that anyone could experience, whether they're in a city or a country environment. But there wasn't anything,
yeah.
yeah, there wasn't anything in
No,
particular.
not with Tassie, not majorly.
Yeah,
Like I had no problems, you know, making new friendships and socially and all that. And look, and as I said, you know, like that course was so intense and took up so much of my time, and I was focused on it. So there was nothing really else to go wrong apart from what happened early in the piece, anyway. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah,
And so what I understand that you were in Tasmania for a while,
yep.
and you, correct if I'm wrong, you studied your
Went back to the city.
performing arts, and then you went back to the
Yep,
city in regards to employment
to work.
prospects. Yep.
Hmm.
And from there up to the top end to Northern Territory.
Yeah, after I did a teaching degree after a while, yeah. So
Yeah.
8 years, you know, working as an actor on the roads around all the schools and doing all sorts of things, a bit of TV, bit of this, bit of that, bit of theatre. And I thought, well, if I really want to, because I was still renting and occasionally living with my mother still.
Yeah.
I thought, look, I really want to get some property of my own, just to invest a bit. And so teaching was the backup plan, and that's what I did that in Melbourne. Finished that and moved to Darwin, and I'm still teaching.
Yeah. 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 So that's a pretty big. move like from say Melbourne all the way through to NT, the
Yep.
Northern Territory, Darwin, and you're within I guess you'd say, because Darwin's a reasonable size in regards to like it's a city environment, you'd say, wouldn't you?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Not massive, similar to maybe Geelong or something like that.
yeah, yep, yep. And so you go through, you do your teaching. It's pretty hot up there, and then
Mm.
the question is like, where to from here? Was that
Yeah.
that's
Well, winters are amazing up there.
yeah.
You'll have a 30-degree day and a 15-degree night, so it's cool enough to sleep. But you can go and camp under the stars on the weekends and things like that. So I loved up there in the winter. It's just a magic place. And in the winter, when you're teaching, the school kids get a month off. They don't just get 2 weeks; they get a whole month. So that middle period, I used to take some trips, let's say across to Northwest Australia, do big road trips and things like that. And it even gave me enough time when I decided to find somewhere where the wet season just wasn't so horrendous like it can be up there. It gave me time to come here in the car and check out some properties within that, that winter holiday. Came down here, found a place, fell in love with it, put a deposit on it, and went back and did 6 months more work while I was sorting out, all the what do you call it, the contracts with the property and all that sort of thing, and ended up down here the following year.
Yeah, yep, yep. And so by that stage, when you've arrived in Kyolge, is that 2004 that you arrived down that way?
Yeah, 2003. Yeah,
2003.
end of 2000.
Yeah. And then for you, I guess really this is the real full blown tree change. It was going out to land. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it was a full commitment. Buying the property and deciding to plant some roots up here. So, and big property, 220 acres. Most of it rainforest. About 30 acres, I suppose, I had to maintain because it, was once in its heyday a dairy farm, but basically 80% of it had turned into regrowth. Wouldn't have been a dairy farm for probably 40 years before that. Earlier in its heyday, it was even a banana plantation. There were old buildings and things on the property all over the place. Very mountainous, steep, very wet, full of leeches. But at
Wow.
the same time, probably 500 different species of plants. I became obsessed with the botanical side of things, and learn a lot about that, and all sorts of things happening, as well as veggie garden and fixing up the house and all that. I started becoming, I suppose, a bit of a land care expert on my own property, and it was great. It was great.
Wow. Just as you started saying that you had multiple buildings on the property, I started having a bit of reminiscence like, is this similar to what your grandfather's was like? There's different buildings there and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, finding old secrets is one of my passions. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, give you a house with corridors and locked doors and you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these were old ruins, spread over the 200 acres. Whether it was an old banana shed or even just a bulldozer track that had been covered over after 30 years. Where's that go? What's it lead to? Just looking for any, I suppose, any evidence of some other thing or life that someone else had that hadn't been discovered for a long time. I was always looking for those sort of things. So.
Yeah. Wow. And like this time, this 203, 204, when you first got to that property and you were living there and you had all these buildings and bulldozer paths and so forth, like, was there a learning curve there about how to be that land care person, or it was stuff that you always had there, or how did that transpire?
No, definitely a learning curve. Due to a couple of neighbours who were into that as well. Not that I wasn't into it. Like, they didn't say, how about this? I was interested in it from the start. Otherwise, I wouldn't have wanted to go there. But they were my go-to people for learning about how do I do this, and what's this plant that I've just found, and just guiding me to the right resources about whether it was identifying things or how to deal with weeds or how to get things growing faster, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So you're linking in with knowledge and people that were neighbours, people in the community that had the knowledge that they could impart and they could share with you and take you on the steep learning curve of what your land was all about, your little tropical rainforest.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it was my next degree. I've got 3 separate degrees, and I suppose doing going to the first place in Kyolge, it was another learning experience, and I just, I'm a bit of a sponge like that. I love new things like that. So if it takes my interest, I'll just go for it and learn as much as I can. So, especially in the initial days, I wasn't working full time. I was probably only working 2-3 days a week to get us by. So I had heaps of time to invest myself in all that. So
yeah, you sound like Tom Sawyer going off down the river.
Yeah, maybe it's great. I love it. One of my favorite books.
What was that?
One of my favorite. That's as well as the veggie garden and things like that. Started dabbling with animals, raising sheep and things like that. That's a slightly not so positive story, the raising of the animals, but everything else was pretty good.
Yeah. So, I mean, like taking on, I'm just thinking, like, for some people, they would run for the hills. Like, you've got to learn all this stuff about the land and, vegetables and animals and just being in a whole new environment. Like, what goes into making it possible that you were able to and continue to be able to do that? What goes into that? Because it's a skill and talent there, I reckon.
Well, it's about being open. Like, I know some fantastic gardeners in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And they say, "Oh, do you grow this and this up there?" And I say, "No chance, because it won't grow.
Yeah.
It'll either go moldy, or it'll get fly blown, or it just won't survive the conditions." So what I mean by being open is that I actually had to be open to what worked here, rather than the mindset of, I'm going to take my ideas from down there and bring them here. That doesn't quite work. So like, I had to be open to what worked here, as far as, when it came to growing things. What was the next part of the question?
Well, what is it that you've drawn upon? What resources do you have that made it able to do what you've done? Because you've gone from different states, gone to a property that's 220 acres. A lot of it's like, sort of semi-rainforest. And now you're making it all happen on this land, and it's all new. So what makes it possible for you to do that?
Okay, so I was talking about the open mind, and also persistence. Not giving up. So something doesn't work, try something different.
Okay.
But also just a real passion for learning new stuff. Because I've always been keen on educating myself, whatever that might be. So whether that's whatever's in the veggie garden, or what I have to do to make it work to raise animals, or the land care stuff I was doing, finding out about contracts with the government where I would be getting, in those days we had carbon offsets and things like that. I locked up probably 30 acres of that land for over 10 years. No one else was allowed to touch it because of the land care regeneration I was doing it. So a lot of research, a lot of study, a lot of practice, a lot of failure, and with most things, quite a bit of success too, and just being really connected to it, what I was doing.
Yeah. And then that persistence, that being open, that learning through trial and error. What is it that you had that enabled that?
Oh, you're digging deep here, aren't
Yeah,
you?
because you've
What is
done
it that
it.
I had?
Yeah.
I just think that sense of adventure in the end. And not, I don't like getting stuck in a rut. I always want to find something new to do.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it's just about pushing my boundaries all the time and finding something different to explore. And at that time, all that stuff was really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was adventure. It was really exciting. And with that, you were able to have the trial and error mentality of it didn't work. Let's try it again. Let's do it a different way.
Yeah, yeah. Or I did it right, it failed. Let's just try again anyway. So, for example, something like that, where I knew I was doing the right thing, I just didn't have the experience to do it perfectly. That I just had to keep persisting at what I needed to do to make it work. So that sort of thing is stuff like renovation. I was never good at building things or stuff like that. So that took it. To me, that wasn't trial and error. That was persistence more because oh, jeepers, I cut that wood badly. I need to chuck that out and cut it again type
Yeah,
thing. So,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and I
Okay.
suppose persistence, I suppose, means a bit of resilience too, because if you let, mistakes like that get you down, well, you're not going to get anywhere. Not up here.
Yeah. So resilience is important to have when you're in those environments. It's
Hmm.
you need to have it up there. How come you need
Yeah.
to have that?
Sorry.
How
My
come?
dog
How
decided
come?
to bark outside at the wrong time.
That's all right. He likes resilience as well, right? Um, but how come resilience is so important in these environments? You mentioned resilience. You need to have it up here because.
Yeah. Look, I think the isolation and the bush magnifies the good and the bad.
Uh-huh.
So you need your resilience to find that middle ground.
Yeah, the resilience.
That's how I see it. Like we had that chat a week ago, and I've thought about that little conversation a little bit. And I think, like you really get tested when you decide to take a risk and go out bush and do something different, emotionally, and your resilience brings you back to the middle. If you don't have it, you can fall apart. And I've seen that happen with other people and little bits myself, but I bring myself back.
Yeah. So there's a real strong theme of self-reliance. You
Mm,
need to keep it together to have that resilience because stuff can go not, things can go wrong, but it's about going,
yeah.
okay, let's pull it back to the middle and let's pick up the pieces and make it happen again.
Yeah. Well, you don't have, in the city, and networks are more, I suppose, more, what's the word? There's more strings to your network in the city. There's heaps more friends, maybe more family. Whereas when you go to the bush, you're moving away from them. And it's not that you don't have friends or contacts here. It's just that they're all going through the same thing, and there's not as many of them. So sure, your web, your network of contacts still might be, it might cover a big area, but it doesn't have as many lines through it. There's not as many, crossovers. So you've got less people to fall back on if
Mm-hmm.
you need help, and a lot of time, you've just got to rely on yourself. Otherwise, you're on the phone the whole time, and what's the point of that?
And then depends on where you are, it might drop out anyway.
That's right, especially here. Here. Lucky we don't have a storm tonight because we might not be having this call.
Yeah, might be dropping it down to audio only to keep up with the data, if that at all, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of, it's a bit of a metaphor, like in regards of if you're building a house in a city environment, the potential of calling on the multiple tradespeople to build the house
Mm.
is there. If you're building a
Mm-hmm.
house, metaphorically in the country, you've got some of the services around, but you pretty much
Yeah.
become the jack of all trades. You pick up the hammer, you pick up the electrical wire, you pick up the
Yeah.
bricks.
Yeah.
If YouTube's running, you learn how to do it on the internet, and you bring it
Yeah.
together. So the
It's
resilience,
amazing when you're in the country. It's amazing what you can learn to fix with the most ridiculous materials. So I'm an expert on tape on what that can fix as far as your house and your plumbing and your electricity goes.
yeah,
And you just learn ways to make do. You'd never do, like if I did that in the city, I'd get laughed at. But here I don't care because not many people see it, so it's not a big deal.
yeah. So you're problem solving, and you're finding a solution.
Mm.
And I guess I'm sort of thinking out loud, like, you've got a situation, you've got limited resources, you've got a problem, you find a solution, and you make it happen. How is that for you? Like coming to that resourcefulness, how's that?
It's easy, sort of.
It's
Sometimes
easy.
it needs a deep breath though. You saying that made me remember an incident once at my old place. Used to have a chook shed surrounded by barbed wire. The chook shed was actually an old what do you call it? Look, here was all dairy in the old days, so they used to have their little cream buildings, and the trucks would come up and get the cream out of these buildings. Now these buildings are probably the size of a walk-in wardrobe. Okay, so but square. I'm getting to the point of this. One night we got home late and the chook shed was still open. Went to lock up the chooks, and inside is probably a 4-meter python with a
Oh.
chook in its jaw. Had to get the python out of the chook shed. No choice. Otherwise, I would have lost my 20 beautiful chooks all in one night.
Yeah.
So what do? You find a way to get the thing out. Doesn't matter what you do, you still find a way. So you take your rake up there. You didn't know there's no way I was going to kill that snake. Just had to get it out of that space so I could lock the chooks away.
Yeah.
So you take up a as I said, the rake, the spade, whatever it is, and in the end I had to grab the damn thing by the tail and just run as fast as I could and make sure that the head came nowhere near my body. Not that it would have killed me because they're not poisonous, but you still don't want to get a bite because you'll get infected and things like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of moments like that where you've got to really just take a deep breath and dive in.
Yeah. Oh, I guess the choice otherwise is the consequences. So it's like, what is it you want? You want to have a solution to the situation, or you're just going to accept the consequences. And I guess if you let the chickens go that time, what is it going to be the next day? And what is it the next day? And what is it the next day?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would never have had chooks because the python would have taken over the chook house and made it its home. That wasn't an option.
Yeah. 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 So I'm hearing like along the lines of digging your heels in and doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, take a deep breath and off you go.
Yeah.
And it still was one of the scariest moments I've done. Don't worry about that. But you still got to do it.
Oh, it's quite a visual, like running away with a tail and a big python trying to bend its neck around, and you're running because you're trying to keep its head away. You could do something that
Oh, it was heavy. A 4-meter snake's pretty heavy. It's still, it's probably 80 kilos.
Wow.
It wasn't easy.
Yeah. 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 Wow. Wow. That's interesting. Fascinating stuff. So I'm just aware of the time. Like, I guess I'm thinking of your experiences and how far you've come. If you were putting out there, like some, say, three points, 3 tips for people who are wanting to consider a tree or a sea change? Like, coming from
Yeah.
someone who's actually done it, like, what would your 3 key tips be for that?
Okay. If you're going to do it with someone, this is my first and most important tip.
Yep.
And help you can stay on track here. My first one, most important one, if you're going to do it with a partner or someone that you really care about, make sure that your relationship is already strong and has been tested before you go to the bush. Yep. Because if you do it too early and you haven't been through the hard yards together, if your resilience hasn't been tested, it won't last. It just won't cope, because, as I said earlier, in this environment, it magnifies what you're going through because you're on your own a lot of the time. So, you don't have those massive networks to fall back on. So that'd be my tip 1.
Yep.
Tip 2, be open-minded. Don't come here with tunnel vision. This is the way I'm going to do things, because the environment will beat you.
Yep.
Just like the snake story. And just like you can't grow, like massive sized tomatoes up here, you just can't do it because they don't survive. They'll die. They won't even get to your table. You've got to grow a different variety with the thick skin.
Flexible mindset.
Thick skin. Sorry?
So it's having a...
the tomatoes...
Yeah, I'm just trying to tap into what you're talking about. It's like having a flexible mindset. Don't be rigid in your thinking. Work in with your environment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, it could be the weather, it could be the wildlife, it could be a fire, it could be a flood. Who knows what you're going to get? You can't always predict what's going to happen next. So you got to be flexible and ready to change.
Yeah.
So that's a second thing. And the third one, which we haven't talked about, which we did last time, was to find connections with the outside world. So for me, what's really made me survive here is my job and the way I, being a teacher, and the way I connect with, the young people in the communities and what I'm doing on the artistic front and all that sort of thing. So have a passion, I suppose, outside of your home where you live, because when it gets hard at home, you've got something to hold you together as well. So, and to keep you positive.
Yeah. So it sounds like, just touching on that last point, is that, yes, whilst you're going to embrace what the environment's about and, do your best on that front, it's also having an outlet for you, like an outlet of creativity and an expression of who you are, so that it can help you keep buoyant and assist potentially with resilience as well. Like, it's a positive add to that. Would that be right in coming to that?
Absolutely. And the people who I know who are tree changers up here, who have survived really well, they have a really passionate hobby. So, I've got one friend, he's a welder, and, that's his art form, and he does the markets every weekend. So that's not only about the welding, that's his social world. And then but he's still connected to his place. Got another friend who, very similar, but he travels a lot. So he imports, clothes and things like that from Asia, and he sells them at markets as well. So, and that's his, I suppose, his connection to other things. So yeah, don't just rely on that tree change thing. Have something more than that, something extra.
Yeah. And what's coming to mind is that, do you run the risk of things imploding? If your tree change is your everything, there is the potential of things imploding.
Yeah.
No,
well, you could have a job, but if it's not your passion, if it doesn't grab your soul, you don't have the balance, because living in the bush is actually such a powerful experience. So what I'm getting at is, we have room for so much. If we come with an expanded mindset, I suppose is what I'm saying. Just being in the bush, for some might go, oh, that's all I'll need. But in reality, it won't work. You need more. Just like it's no different to living in the city in a way. Okay, you've got your suburbs, you've got your house and all that, And if you really want to be happy, you need something passionate in your life to keep you driving. So, so yeah, that's just where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. Well, good stuff. Excellent. All right. Well, look, just aware of the time. I'm really keen to.
I have no idea at the time.
Oh, it's we've gone 54 minutes
Okay, 20.
so
Yeah.
far in. Oh, it's 20 past. Yeah. Okay. We're tracking all right. Before I throw it out to Anna to see if she's got any questions, anything that she'd like to ask, or anyone else who's on the call as well, right?
Well, I hope we've been interesting enough to start with.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. But before I do that, is there anything that you wanted to add, outside of what I've been probing you for? Is there anything that you wanted to add to this that hasn't been said that you feel just want to express?
Yeah. One more thing.
Yeah.
If things go wrong, you can still make it work.
Okay. Things
go wrong, you can still make it work. So, okay. If it's your dream and things go wrong, you don't have to give up. You just have to, I suppose, just adjust and adapt and try another way. So, look, I'll be completely open. So I was here for 6 years with this particular person. Didn't really work out, and didn't work out in a pretty negative way, this one. And I was not in a good space, let's say 2010.
Yep.
Not in a good space at all.
Yep.
At that breakup. And I sort of didn't want to leave here, but I wasn't sure how to make it work. And, the negativity, I suppose, in myself was affecting everything. It was affecting my job as teaching as well. I wasn't doing a great job. I really wanted to. Trust me, I loved what I did.
Yeah.
But I'd go every day to work, quite depressed and feeling like I wasn't doing my job justice.
Yeah.
Wasn't doing myself justice. Was in a space where I was even contemplating, doing something bad to myself.
Yep.
So I hit rock bottom. I've probably never been as rock bottom as that, because my dream of being here absolutely fell apart. It really fell apart, and I was on my own and had to deal with that. And that rock bottom point, all sorts of things came up. Do I get rid of my job? Do I stop being a teacher? Do I get out of here and go back home? But something in me was still burning, saying to me, no, I want to persist. I want to keep going at this. So in that rock bottom, I learnt that I needed to change some things about myself and the way I approach stuff. So I, like you, went and educated myself more, again, in something different, like I always tend to do when things get stuck in a rut, and went and did some study in coaching, in personal coaching, and learned. And for me, that was a self-development journey, and really, really helped me again build my relationships with my workmates and colleagues and my students. And then from that, I've been able to pick up the pieces again. And to be honest, it's so much better now than it ever was in that period between 2004 and 2010. In the way that not only can I be content where I am as far as my environment, my home and all that, but also be really, really happy and, succeeding and doing things I'd never dreamed of 10 years ago. I'm doing them now. I've been not only teaching, but I've been involved in a feature film project over the last 2 years with a friend of mine. 6 weeks ago, I decided, let's go the next step. I'm writing my own. It's nearly finished. So there's always new things happening, and things are exciting. And it's great. It's great. It's never been better. And so that educating, that self-education again, which I go through time and time again. It's happened about, through my life every time. That's what lifts me out of my rut and gets me fired up and sparked up again. So I'm sure I'll have another down one day, but I'll know the solution, and that is to go and learn something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And push my boundaries, not just learn something I already know, learn something completely out of my scope that maybe I've always been interested in, but I've never really pursued. And when I do that, I can pick myself up quite easily. Wherever I am, whatever I'm doing.
Listening to you talk today, and also, when we chatted last week as well, there seems to be a strong theme of taking on challenge and embracing uncertainty, dealing with change. But it's all, in some respects, that's just life. That's what I'm getting a theme of, is that you're embracing change and the challenge that happen, and out of it you come with new knowledge and a new place and a new state, and there's a whole lot of stuff that you've done.
I've been up here for 18 years. I think that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nearly 14 years.
Yeah. No, it's quite admirable that the way you embrace all that, and the way that you keep on going, you keep on learning, you keep on taking up the challenges. And I'm just thinking, is that a key ingredient? Is that a kick-ass ingredient that you've got in you?
For me, yeah, absolutely.
But I mean,
for someone else, I'm not sure.
Sure.
My grandparents were very content being the same every day for 60 years.
Yeah.
They seemed content. They do the same thing, Every summer they'd, I'm an Italian background. Every summer, every weekend, they do the same thing over and over and over again. What I mean by summer is, that's the time they grew things and bottled tomatoes and, did all that making festivities and all that sort of thing. So they had their routines and they stuck them every year over and over and over again. I can't do that.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious as to whether that's a part of your makeup that made all of this whole possible. Melbourne, Tasmania, Northern Territory, Queensland, take on 220 acres, after a certain amount of time, go up to another place and just change, you've embraced it, and it's been an asset to you. And I'm sort of thinking out loud in regards of, for the people that are watching and curious about this, is is that something they need to build a muscle around more? Is their ability to embrace change, to embrace the potential of doing a change like this, if that is what they want to do?
Yeah, I think so. But I think everyone's different. There's a different generation up here as well. There's the old established community, the old farmers who have been here for generations, and they do things the same every day.
Yeah.
They don't particularly adapt to the new, the tree changes coming in. But I think, especially when I first got here, I think that's probably shifting a little bit now because there's so many of us.
Yes.
So they've got no choice.
You're forced to be reckoned with.
Yeah, because you just can't help crossing paths economically and socially and all that sort of thing. So it happens. But there's a lot of people still set in their old ways, and they're quite comfortable.
Yeah.
But they were brought up in this environment.
Yeah.
So but you'll find that those people, there's not a tree on their land. Their creeks, they might have lots of cows and all that sort of thing, but it's a very different landscape to the typical tree changer who wants the nature and who wants the bush. To them, it's like freaking hippies. What are they doing? That's not the way to do it.
Yeah. No, we need the land for the grass and the beef and all the rest of it.
I could tell some stories that'll curl your hair, as the way they used to practice their their land clearing and things in the old days. I'm not going to mention names or where they come from, but people have told me stories. Oh, when I was a little kid, Christmas Day, Dad would say, "Go and light the bush with the match," and just set the whole joint on fire. It's not lies, it's true.
Yeah.
It's all true.
Jeepers.
It's a different, completely different way of doing things.
Yeah, interesting. Shall we touch base with Anna and see what's going on there, and see if she's got something that she'd love to run past you, seeing as you're the source of knowledge. Hey there, Anna. How you doing?
Well, it looks like you've been having a good laugh.
No. That last statement was pretty shocking. Yeah, not surprising though. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, hey, that was so interesting, and so much resonates for me. I mean, completely different stories, but yeah, lots and lots of the things that you shared really resonated. So that was great. Questions, Wayne? You've been so thorough. I guess the only thing that I was thinking about that I'm not sure was covered was, you've obviously over time, like, you found your mechanism for dealing with, like, when you start to downward spiral, if you like, you've got your mechanism, which is learning something new that helps to kind of pull you out of that. Do you have you, what am I trying to say? Have you like developed your own trigger so you can quickly, are you starting to identify faster when that's happening? Do you know what I mean? Like over time, there's something that you notice that you can go, this is not okay. I need to do something about this. That's the piece that I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's a good question. Do I have a trigger? When I start, if I get sad for more than a week, I know that it's serious. And I start thinking about, what's really wrong here. And I suppose I have my thought processes around there and just try and put my finger on what it really is. And if I can't deal with it, the actual problem, then I'll think, okay, what is it about me? So if it's not external, then I'll go internal. And then I suppose I'll work it out from there. So I was also saying to Wayne last time, where in the summers here for me, like as I'm getting older, I'm finding dealing with the heat much, much more difficult.
Right.
So how do I deal with that? I love the environment and all that sort of thing. Winters are fantastic. I love them. But between October and February, it gets really difficult. Not that I can't afford air conditioning. So, we've just got overhead fans and things like that in this place. So I suppose if I, went and got $10,000 and put a new roof on and fix the house up, that would solve that. But it doesn't really, because I'm here because I want to be outside and I want to enjoy the landscape. And going out there means I'm in this oppressive environment. That's how I feel now. When I first came here, I didn't feel like that. As I'm getting older, I feel like that. So I was saying to Wayne the other day, I've started on the quiet. Don't tell my wife, even though she's listening. I've been going into real estate, let's say on a Saturday for a half an hour, sneakily looking at places in a cooler environment like Tasmania again. Because, it's not running away from anything. It's just finding a place where I can feel physically more comfortable. So, and I've been there, so it's not scary. It's no big deal. I'm quite happy to go there. She's not convinced because she's scared it's going to be too cold, but that's all right. We'll figure that out over time.
Yeah. I love that you're so open to the journey. It's never about that end, that final destination. It's always, it's okay to change. It's okay to keep trying new things, and something might suit you for a period of time, but then when it no longer feels that way, again, it's that's okay. I think so many people get stuck. And of course, we're extremely fortunate to have had the opportunities that we have to make these changes and to have that freedom. Lots of people don't.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well,
I love.
People are very sorry to interrupt, but not just on what you're saying. Some people are very tunnel visioned about their dreams. And even if they don't work, they'll keep persisting and persisting and put themselves through a lot of pain without even considering whether the dream is worth having.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, if that desire, oh, excuse me, something.
I can still hear
if that
you.
desire
Yep.
is a painful one, over and over and over and over again. What's that saying that we learn in coaching, Wayne? If you repeat the same mistakes over and over again, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
So it's either your approach to what you're doing or what you're doing isn't good for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's about being open to the fact that you might be wrong, I suppose.
Yeah. You might be wrong, and things do change. You know, you can change things, but things are changing around you, you're changing. So it is about adapting, like constantly adapting and reevaluating to really get the most out of life, which is what it's all about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I guess what I hear you say as you say that is that, you know, you need to adapt. Like the environment around you is a great metaphor for that. It's constantly changing. And you need to go with it in many respects. You can't have that rigid approach like you're talking about. You may get away with it maybe within a city environment, but it doesn't sound like you get away with it within the country.
No. You can't. You know, I know right now that I've been focusing on all these work things and the grass is 6 foot tall at the moment. It's taking over the whole property. So it's got to a point where my mower won't work anymore. I've got to get someone in with a tractor to deal with that problem. So, you know, like there comes to a point where you've got to, as you're saying, adapt and do something to deal with the stuff that's going on. Yeah. Because otherwise it will overtake you.
Yeah.
Right. I have so much to say, but
it's not the environment, it's emotional as well, really. Yeah. On many levels, on all sorts of levels.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to put out there, Anna, at this stage?
Yeah, like I was saying, there's so much I could say, but no, Wayne, I think you've done a great job, and just so interesting to hear the story. I mean, I've written down a ton of notes. I think you're talking about passion. I completely agree. It's so important to have a passion regardless of where you are, but particularly when you're in a much more isolated and challenging environment, it's really important to have that outlet. And I was thinking about your grandparents. You know, they seemed really happy in the same environment and they didn't really do anything different. And I guess I feel like, well, you don't know what you don't know. So for people who have lived in the city or who have lived in the West, for example, and then change their lives and experience a completely different environment, you still know all that stuff. You still know the kind of busyness and almost futility of life in some ways in the city. So you want to change that. You've moved to a rural place, but you can't. That doesn't mean you're just going to be like your grandparents, because you've still got that knowledge. I'm not articulating it very well, but I guess a great example is very recently I was in Nepal and I stayed for 2 nights in a rural village, very, very, very basic. And one day there for me felt like a week. I was going out of my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, the time is going so slow. And it was amazing and it was beautiful and interesting. But wow, I was like, I didn't have my to-do list or my phone or my, and it was crazy. And these people, they're so happy. They're happier often than we are. They have such a basic way of life, but again, they don't know what they don't know. Yeah, so I think it's a real challenge to move from the city to make a tree change. And it sounds like, wow, you've done an amazing job in an incredible environment. It sounds just wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I suppose what you're saying, it's the Pandora's box of being educated. Once your mind's open
Yeah. Yeah.
You're open to not only, open to not only the wonderful opportunities of, what you're going to be educated about, but you're also open to the fact that the mundane parts of life can be so hard.
Yeah. That's right.
You say that with such a pause.
Yeah.
That sounds like there's emotion. Oh, good golly. Oh. Daniel, it's been awesome talking to you again. I really loved it.
Thanks,
it's funny because it's like you can physically talk about what you've done, but it's not just the physical. There's the journey on many levels that you've gone on, emotionally and so forth. That is so much a part of what the story is about. And it's really good that you've articulated really well. So I just thank you for all that you've given and shared, and the generosity that you've brought tonight and
pleasure
as well.
Pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
it's an awesome. I saw your post and I thought, I can share my story. I'd be really excited to do that. I'm in a good place, so
nice.
So yeah,
nice.
Great opportunity. Thank you.
No.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, it's very rich, very rich. That's wonderful. Good stuff. Well, look, I'm going to respect all of you. I'm going to respect your time tonight, Anna and Daniel, and I'm going to say, unless there's some really pressing closing thoughts, I'm going to say let's wrap it up, and been great sharing this with you.
Thanks, Wayne. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Anna, for being
Thank you.
on.
Thank you. It was great. All the best.
Okay.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you. Enjoy the cold.
Yes. Take care.
Excellent. See you later, guys. Thanks again.
Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.